Mr. Brad Watts with the hospitality industry first. Then we're going to hear from our two economists, and I can't think of a better person to close us out other than Mr. Scott Ballard. But Mr. Watts has been here. We thought we were going to get started at 1, and I know he had a commitment. So I want him to come down and give an update on the hospitality, the restaurant industry, the bar industry. We know how much they are suffering through this pandemic, and I will tell you that I've known Mr. Watts for a long time. He has a great group of restaurants. You see him on there, Cecilia, Kahlua Street, the River Room, and if you just peek at your news every now and then, he's been a passionate advocate for this industry and the things that they're going through, and I thought it appropriate to hear from a restaurant member who's enduring this, get some remarks, and maybe understand what they are feeling so that we can come up with recommendations to continue and further help this industry out. So, Mr. Watts, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jason. I wanted to thank you for having me here today. My wife wanted me to thank you too, because I can unburden myself to you instead of her like I do every day. She's about had enough of me. I also wanted to thank a couple of people who are here today, have been fighting for our industry. Dawn Starnes with NFIB and Stephen with Lobby, and I was hoping that Stan was here today. Stan, of course, is the executive director and a task force member for the Louisiana Restaurant Association, and I serve on the Baton Rouge board here. There's about 20 members on that board, and I've been on that board now for 4 years. It took me 3 years to figure out what my role was and how comfortable I could be, but it turns out that 19 people agree on something, and then they turn to me and ask me why I disagree with them. So I think boards have need for a guy like me on all of them. I'm going to be brief. I know it's late on a Friday, and a lot of the stuff that I had intended to address has been talked about already today. I think that was part of the reason why Jason asked me here today, is because I have 2 restaurants here in Baton Rouge and a bar, and I'm closed. I did the curbside service thing for a while, and when the governor said we could go to 25%, I decided to shut down. I have watched too many of my colleagues in the restaurant business spend all of the money they've been given to make it through the summer. And they're going to have some real problems here in the fall. And, you know, I had some remarks about what was going to happen with some of the restaurant and hospitality folks going forward. And, you know, I appreciate Congressman Graves being here, but that didn't sound very hopeful for some of us. So, you know, I want to say that I'm here speaking for myself, not for the LRA or for any other restaurant owners. Ruffin might have an entirely different perspective on how his business is thriving or not. So I'm just here to talk about, you know, my individual situation. I have 2 restaurants and a bar. Combined revenues about $2 to $2.5 million a year. I think I probably fit in the category of most bars and restaurants, and not, you know, a super successful one that may do $10 million in sales a year. That's not me. You know, it's 3 very modest places that do modest numbers. So kind of go back and talk about how I got here. Monday, March 16th, governor gets on television at 1 o'clock, says by midnight all the bars and restaurants will be closed. Worst day of my life. $65 employees at 1, 5 employees by 6 o'clock. Mostly because we were forced to shut down and there was no plan. No plan. So we did the curbside, the to-go business. Before COVID, that was 1% of my total revenue, 1%. So, you know, if I was able to do a lunch here, a lunch there, then, you know, that was good for me. But we didn't do a whole lot of business. We got to a point where we could open at 25%, and I decided I was going to take a break because of moments like this. Tough. It's tough business. I knew that before COVID. So I got in my car for a week to clear my head. I went to Atlanta, Birmingham, Memphis, Nashville, Little Rock, Arkansas, and Jackson just to see what was going on. Everybody was in a different part of phase one. Saw a lot of empty dining rooms, saw a lot of angry servers and bartenders coming off of unemployment to nothing. A couple of exceptions, a few. So when I got back to Baton Rouge, I decided to shut it down. This is the reason why I closed. 40% of my total revenue for my 3 establishments is on-premise special events. I made a decision a long time ago to diversify. I didn't want to rely on walk-in business only, so we do a lot of special events. And by that I mean weddings, receptions, rehearsal dinners, corporate events, birthday parties, fundraisers, charity events, class reunions. You get the picture, all right? 62 events in March, June, and July. March, April, and June and July have canceled. 62 events. I have 62 people looking for the deposit money back. It's tough. It's a tough situation. And these are people who have saved for their daughters' weddings and their rehearsal dinners. And I took their $500 or their $1,000 in good faith, knowing that I was going to provide that service when the time came. So some people are understanding that other people's aren't. Our business models aren't based on 25 to 50% occupancy. They're based on 100% occupancy on a Friday and Saturday night. Today is Friday. I wish I was serving dinner to the couple of busy restaurants tonight, but I'm not. We hope to turn 2.5 times. But, you know, even the most successful restaurants right now, Ruffin, are you turning 2.5 times, 3 times? No. Might have 1.5 seatings, and that's not what our models are based on. I go back to the miserable servers with the masks, and the unemployment money was high. Now some people won't agree with that, but the $600 from the federal government, man, you all know this, you smart business people, it was based on a 40-hour work week at $15 an hour. The federal government has effectively raised minimum wage without ever voting on it. I got a perfect example. I have a hostess who goes to LSU. She works 15 hours a week. She makes $11 or $12 an hour. She's perfectly happy. She puts gas in her car. She goes to Wendy's a couple times a week. She was making $750 on unemployment. I understand the intention was good, but it didn't work out that way. My only option was to call these people back to work, and if they didn't come back to work, I had to report them to the Workforce Commission, and then they were just going to be mad at me and go work for somebody else anyway. One of my restaurants is in the Perkins Road area. The other one's in downtown. My bar is in downtown. Downtown Baton Rouge, I'm not so upset about that because there's nobody in downtown Baton Rouge. Hotels are empty. There are no events. There are no concerts. There's no tourism. There's no people. You know, Irene's in New Orleans, established in 1993. There's a line around the block. Everybody's been to Irene's. They've decided to stay closed. I've kind of watched that model. If Irene's is smart enough to stay closed during this thing, then maybe it's something I should do. So I have. You know, a couple things that people aren't talking about. Food costs are high, Ruffin. They're higher than they were before this. The supply chain issue is real. A friend of mine ordered 90 items from Cisco, which is a great company. He got 50 of them. There's a lot of holes to be filled. And then training new employees who don't know your menu and don't know how you operate is tough to get around. It's tough. That's a tough challenge for the people in the restaurant business. So what happens is the quality of your food is different, goes down, people start to complain. It's a tough situation all the way around. And I didn't come here today to get emotional and make you guys feel sorry for me. He told me he wanted to know what's going on in my business. This is what's going on in my business. There are exceptions. Some people out there who are thriving right now, and good for them. But I will tell you that there is a ancillary industry that's related to the restaurant industry that is getting killed right now. And I know you guys have talked about it. Liquor and food distributors, caterers. Caterers are non-existent right now. Hotels, photographers, florists, equipment rental companies. There's a guy here in town, his whole business is based on renting tents and chairs and tables and supplying people with bartenders and waiters for events. He's cooked. The musicians are, desperate right now. So what help have we gotten? And I'll wrap this up quickly. The PPP came down the line 2.5 times our average monthly payroll, 60% for payroll, 40% for rent. Came out to originally be 10 weeks, probably lasted us about 8 weeks. We're in week 22 of this thing now. And from what I hear from Congressman Graves, there's no round of PPP coming anytime soon. And back to my original point, there's a lot of restaurants here in Baton Rouge and New Orleans and Lafayette and all around the state. I sit on these calls with the LRA, and they don't have any more money. So that's a real problem. The SBA disaster loan, the potential of the loan, and then what was actually reality. $2.5 million in sales, let's say I do a year. I subtract my cost of goods sold, there's $2 million left over. Originally, I had the potential to borrow half of that money. I got a third of that. Goes back to my decision not to open immediately. $300,000 doesn't go as far as, the $1 million that I could have got originally. The Main Street Recovery Grant, run through this state's Department of Treasury, $15,000 grant. The application for the SBA disaster loan was 1 page. The Main Street Recovery Grant is 11 pages with 8 or 9 places to upload tax returns and expense reports and your driver's license and any number of things. So if you are a business in good standing with the state of Louisiana and you're eligible for that $15,000, give it to them, man. There shouldn't be any delay in that. And there is. I got a whole list of things that could help us, but I think it boils down to we need things to get back to normal as soon as we can, and we need money. Now I've saved my money so I can open in September, and that's my plan to open in September, and I'll make it through the end of the year. And if I compare previous years to this year, and I haven't done so well in the fourth quarter this year, I'll have some tough decisions to make. This is all I want to say in closing. I read an article yesterday in NOLA.com. Commander's Palace and Arnaud's, you probably saw the article, are going to lay off 400 people. 400 people at what I consider the benchmark of the restaurant business. There's no better restaurants in this state than those two. They're laying off 400 people because they can't make ends meet. Jubin's restaurant here in Baton Rouge, where I got my start over 30 years ago, is closed through the end of the year. They don't know if they're going to open back at the first of the year. So if that's what's going on in some very big, very successful restaurants in this state, then what does it say about the little guy like me? What hope is there for me going forward? It's easy to say that you can adapt to the future, but it's impossible when we don't know what that future is. So I'll take any questions. Sorry for the breakdown there.
No, Mr. Watts, I appreciate that powerful testimony, and task force members, as we go forward and do our work and we pass bills to help or work with the legislature to pass bills to help small business owners, we need to keep in mind that there are real people behind this and there are real employees behind it. And I think what Mr. Watts demonstrated today is that we need to be conscious about our work, thoughtful. And the other thing is as you hear businesses like this are having to close, the state's not collecting revenue, local government's not collecting revenue. So we have to figure out a way to prop them back up. They're the backbone of our economy, and small businesses obviously need our help. So with that, I do see a question for you. I see somebody's got their light on. Dawn Starnes, yes.
You can't see me.
Yeah, it's hard from up here. You'd be surprised how hard. But Dawn Starnes with NFIB does have a question.
Thank you. Thank you, Dawn Starnes and NFIB. Brad, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to come up here today. Full disclosure, Brad and I have been friends for 1,000 years. But what your story is so compelling because and I know many of you, we've had the conversations on the Zoom calls, but when we're here lobbying for your needs here with the legislators, a lot of times, they get tired of hearing me, they get tired of hearing WAGs, stand and et cetera. And so you give the real voice to it, and it is difficult and it's time consuming. But you spoke to so much of what, we try to get the point across about, which is small business represents so many people in this economy. We provide 50% of the workforce, 50% of the GDP in the country, and we cannot be overlooked in this process. And so I would just pose one question to you, because you and I talked early on in this process. So again, thank you for taking the time and taking the question. Workers' compensation, are you still experiencing where you're having to pay your full premiums? We talked about that early on, and you're not going to get mad at me for asking, but I think it's an enlightening issue for so many people. We talk about all the different types of insurance a business owner has to carry, and workers' comp is a big one. And with being closed and having to do what you're doing, is that kind of a factor in what you've had to decide?
I think between my 3 businesses, I probably pay close to $2,000 a month in workers' comp. One of the great perks of being a member of the Louisiana Restaurant Association is that they supply workers' comp at a very, very good rate, half of what an independent, would offer that. But it's a perk of being a member of the LRA and having access to the self-insured fund. The answer to your question is, it was one of those things that I just put on pause while I was closed. Right now, I want to say something about the people that I lease my property from. They've been incredibly great to me. But it's what happens when you pay your rent on the 1st of every month, and they don't hear from you, and you take care of their property. So they get it. They don't want to go out looking for new tenants right now. It's going to be quite a while before that happens. So I'm paying my liability insurance, I'm paying my light bill, and then I'll work out the rent on down the road. But to answer your question, no, I'm not paying. I'm not open. I don't have any employees. We're not doing anything. But we do plan to open the week after Labor Day.
Thank you. I see Mr. Wagasback has his button pressed.
Brad?
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming in today. One comment and a question. The comment is, the last time you and I spoke was probably about 3-4 weeks ago. And that was, you reached out to me to see how you could help donate time and money to a local nonprofit here that I'm associated with. So it shows the character of the person you are while you're dealing with this challenge. You're reaching out to me to ask how you can give some time and money away. So it says a lot about you as a person. Second thing, in a typical, let's say, forget COVID 2020 for a second. In a normal year, roughly how far apart are your tables in a restaurant set between different tables?
If I look at the floor plan of K Street is a little different. I wouldn't do much at Calora Street to fit within the guidelines, the 50% occupancy right now. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't do much of that. At Cecilia is a 70-seat restaurant. It's a bistro. So that would be a crushing blow. I mean, I couldn't make it on one seating and 30 people a night. That wouldn't work for me. So, I mean, one of the things that the restaurant owners and the bar owners have struggled with during all of this, and I kind of promised myself I wasn't going to get into this, but I will. How are there places that are open and thriving and very busy, and we're not? I mean, I have a lot of friends that work at the casino, but how's the casino like it is, and I can't seat 20 people in the river room to have a cocktail? You know, we can talk about the big box retailers and all of that stuff, but at the end of the day, we're either following the guidelines and we're doing what we should be doing, and we're being safe, or we're not. I mean, one of the big issues that people in the restaurant business are running into right now is that one person shows up sick, they close for a couple days, it disrupts the whole operation, but they feel like they're doing the right thing. Now what I'm finding out is that a lot of people have sick employees, sick managers, sick kitchen people, and they're not saying anything. They're sending them home and continuing to do their business. It's a problem.
I guess last follow-up question. as you see other stores, venues remain open without fire marshal code limitations, do you think that if you were given flexibility as a restaurant owner to have certain safeguards, but also be able to shift it, without having an arbitrary percentage number on you, but just give you some guide, could you be operating more effectively now?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yes, and I just was, I listed those factors that went into how I made my decision. It just seemed right to me. I left the whole part out about safety. I brought up Irene's. When I was looking to see when Irene's was established in 1993, the first thing I saw was a Yelp review from a woman who went there, and she had a reservation. Irene's decided to close. She leaves them a 0-star review on Yelp and says, they weren't open. Well, come on. I mean, and I think there's a lot of that going on. I think Ruffin could allude to that fact. Who's policing the social distancing and the requirements and the restrictions right now are the patrons who go into the establishments. But I think everybody's doing the best they can. I mean, they're trying to struggle through a very tough situation. And so without the restrictions and without it being summer, I mean, let's face it, summer for us is a terrible time of the year. I might have given it a shot. Downtown, it wouldn't make any sense, but maybe at Clear Street it would have.
Last question. The decision whether or not the football season continues or not, whether crowds are allowed, is that a critical component to you? I mean, or what a typical game weekend, what does that mean for your establishment?
Ruffin will give you a different answer to this question. If there's no LSU football, it's good for me. I can't compete with LSU football. Nobody can compete with LSU football. People spend I was speaking to someone earlier about this. People spend their entire week deciding what they're going to do for the football game, and they leave everything else out of that equation. The way that I make my living and cover in September, October, and November, and those Saturdays and those weeks where everybody's excited about football, is through those events that I talked about earlier.
Is it fair to say that if they do have football, but they have crowd limitations,
that'll be good.
You could set up watching parties, events, things like that, if you're allowed to open up at full capacity?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, thank you. It looks like in the back, I do see Mr. Ruffin. Ruffin Rodrigo with Rufino's has a question. Yep.
Yeah, Bob Bucher, I'm back in the cheap seats. Thank you for, fella, can barely see you, Jason. Brad brings up so many points, the emotion we all have gone through it, when we were told to shut down. And, going to the last question about LSU football, Fridays are great. Everybody's packed on Friday night, but Saturday's pretty terrible for the majority of the places outside of the LSU area, because everybody's either at home watching or at the game tailgating, and therefore, so it's going to be interesting to see if we don't have football season, to see what happens with people. What are they going to do? What are they going to watch? If it's on TV, it'll help our establishments if you have TVs and a place to sit. As far as the square footage and the percentage, it's if you ask the fire marshal, they have a different formula and this and that. But the bottom line is 6 feet in some buildings is almost impossible. Most of those places in New Orleans, they're, back in the day when they taxed just the front of the building, so that everything's a shotgun. And you walk in, the bar is 3 feet from the wall, and the tables are on top of each other. You can't socially distance in those establishments. It's almost impossible. I'm just lucky that, I bought a building in Baton Rouge and in Lafayette, both big, huge, square dining rooms where I can, last night I had tables 12 feet from each other. So it's a lot easier for me. But like I said in the task force early on, and I hate to single it out because Brad's one of them, but bars are the places where it's most impossible to social distance. And those are the people, the legitimate bar owners are the ones who really need to be taken care of, because we need to keep those closed. You saw what happened in Tigerland. You saw what happened, and I mean, it's a place where you go to meet people. I'm not going to stand 6 feet from a girl and say, "Hey, can I have your number?" And then it's a place where there's loud music. What do you do when there's loud music? You yell. What do you do when you yell? You spit. And then I had a hostess come back, and she was a part of the Tigerland deal. She said her and 8 of her friends got COVID from sharing a vape pen. I guess after you have a couple of drinks, you can't smoke inside, so they vaped it to accentuate the buzz. But they're all sharing these things, where it's a respiratory virus. It goes straight to your lungs, and everybody gets the COVID. They go home and they give it to their grandparents. It's a thing where we need to. I think restaurants as a whole, especially with the bar rules now, we can social distance. We can, the mask, the seating, the whole deal. I'm 100% sure we're pretty safe. And if we can get into phase 3 to where we can, get with the fire marshal, get with the governor, and make it fair for all restaurants, no matter what the square footage or the shape of the building or the whatever, we got to get these places open. But like Brad said, also hotels being empty, man. I don't have any hotels around my restaurants. We have never depended on that. But I can't imagine New Orleans, inner city Baton Rouge, where they really depended on hotel business and business people coming in and tourists, and they're not coming into their places. And that's the pain that Brad and a lot of the smaller restaurants are having. I mean, it's almost impossible. And employees don't show, one employee gets sick, and it's a trickle effect. And musicians, my God, musicians right now, they're starving. I mean, they're really, I hired a guy in Lafayette, David St. Romain, who's a great musician, and I know he was struggling. I called him, David Wilson, one of my best friends in Lafayette. It was his 40th anniversary. And I had David come into Lafayette, and paid him to serenade them for their anniversary, and it was one of the best nights of their life. But David cried. He was just to have the opportunity to do something like that. And it's the trickle down effect, Brad, is what you hit me most on. It hits everybody: florists, caterers, linen companies, across the board. The restaurant business is the biggest employer outside of the government in the country. And we need help. And it's going to take a lot. So anything that this task force has been so great. And I know it's going to be a lot of struggles and going on and trying to, hopefully a vaccine works. Just heard Trump say that they asked him a question about Russia's already distributing a vaccine, and it's that close. Man, maybe there's some hope with prayers, but in our industry, it's going to take a lot more than hope, man. It's going to take a lot of money. That's pretty much all I had.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, for those comments. And look, I also wanted to recognize Mr. Ruffin Rodriguez for coming to the Capitol when we were pushing these bills and helping us with testimony. And that really, hearing from people like you, really weighs into the minds of those legislators. So thank you for your efforts. I wanted to recognize that. I do see one other question. Looks like it's over here to the right, Keen. Yes, it looks like Mayor Ellis. So when he started with us, he wasn't a mayor, and then now he is. So congratulations to you, Mayor.
Appreciate it. Thank you for your courage, and thank you for what you do. That's why I hate the term small business with everything I have. The money that I had to start my business wasn't small to me, right? The people that we represent are not small. This is everything. This is kitchen table budgeting 101. So, brother, thank you for having the courage, and thank you for having the compassion for your employees. The thing I need to ask you is, being newly elected, are there anything or best practices you've seen from other cities that are innovative and are ways that we can help our restaurant owners on the municipal side, on the city level basic side that can help you in your business. Because when I go back home, this is, I'm going to tell you, you convicted me. You know, I was fortunate to have a business that I could shut down, and we were in the cigar manufacturing, and you know, fortunately that business stayed okay. But you're absolutely right. With these restaurants and bars and mom and pops of the world, you know, I really saw, you know, mom and pop pitted against, you know, big box. But I'd like to know something that I can do. And if you can't think of anything, we'll get in touch with one another. But the things we can do on a city level that can help you and your colleagues, I'd love to hear it.
You know, what's interesting about our industry is that it's completely social. You know, I didn't do any to-go business before COVID because of the atmosphere of my restaurants. I know some people have been to Calora Street and some people have been to Cecilia. They're very quaint, they're fun. And my food doesn't travel well. The presentation and the fact that I have executive chefs and all of that worked well for me. It was an experience. So one of the tough things about COVID and this whole experience is that that's been taken away. I mean, you go into these restaurants and everybody's wearing masks and everybody's scared to be around one another, and we've taken that social component out of our industry. I don't know what it's going to look like after this is over. I really don't. But your people, I'm sorry, were you the mayor of Monroe? We need to get back to normal as quick as possible. I'm not just saying we abandon restrictions and protocols and all of that stuff and just go back to doing what we were doing. That's not what I'm saying. But the faster we get back to normal, the better off, you know, we're gonna be in this industry. It's as simple as that. But like I said, we need to get back to normal, and we're gonna need help. I mean, I don't want people to think that I've given up. I hope that's not what you're walking away from here today thinking. But I thought my best option, if I was going to do something, was to do nothing. I mean, just, you know, as my father used to always tell me, and I had to look it up. He always told me to keep my powder dry. I didn't know what that meant forever. I finally had to Google it, find out what it meant. But it means just save your ammunition, save your resources for later on, and that's what I've decided to do. You know, this is not a nonprofit business. You know, I have investors. I have people who, you know, before COVID were pretty pleased with their returns, and I ran 3 successful businesses in good standing and no debt, and everything was great. We were in Washington, D.C. I was talking to Congressman Graves. It was the last time I saw him. First week in March, I'm in D.C. with the National Restaurant Association. And we're talking about all the stuff we normally talk about: Affordable Care Act, minimum wage, depreciation on our equipment. You know how many times we mentioned, this was March 2nd through the 6th, you know how many times we mentioned COVID? 0. On the 13th, I flew back in New Orleans on the 6th, on the 13th we were shut down. So we got to get back to normal.